Binta, thank you. The others from the organization. It's really meaningful for me to be here because Binta and I have been in discussions about the idea of a diaspora organization, which could bring together the African diaspora to pull together, looking at what you have in common, to be a voice that could add to our voice. So, of course, part of my reason of doing this was because it could really help Human Rights Watch further our own objectives. So I'm really pleased to be able to actually see this project of yours come to fruition and to be able to participate today. So I thought briefly, when Binta said I'd have 15, I thought 15 to talk about human rights problems in Africa. I was thinking 15 minutes or 15 hours? Because, of course, there are so many very complex problems in Africa. And, of course, what I'm going to try to do is condense them based on my observations, sort of wearing my two hats in this world. I used to work as a photojournalist for the Reuters news agency and was based in Africa for many, many years, starting with the South African elections and then going straight to the genocide in Rwanda, and have covered probably 10 armed conflicts as a journalist. And then from 1999 working with Human Rights Watch, with whom I have been since then based in both Sierra Leone for about 6 years and then Senegal after that for about 6 years, covering and being in charge of all of our work on West Africa. So some of the observations that I'm going to make about some of the human rights problems bedeviling Africa, because indeed I keep saying, I mean, it could be the prism, and I would say this working for Human Rights Watch, but I do sincerely believe that Africa's problems are sincerely human rights problems. So I'm going to talk about some of those broader trends that I've identified. But first I wanted to very briefly introduce my own organization. Many of you are familiar with Human Rights Watch, others may not be. So very briefly, we're about 33 years old. Human Rights Watch started off as Helsinki Watch, monitoring the then Soviet states. And then we sort of emerged, starting to cover more and more countries. We now work in about 90 countries. And our objectives are to stand with victims and to push for the perpetrators of human rights abuses to be held accountable. So there are a number of principles that underscore our work. And they are, first of all, neutrality and impartiality. The second one would be in-depth research, on the ground, in-depth research with firsthand witnesses and victims to human rights abuses. So I always say, impartiality and confidentiality is the third one, because of course we often can't get that information that we need unless we can assure the victims of their security. So impartiality and neutrality is central to our work, because that's also the arm that allows us to be credible and to be able to speak with perpetrator groups of all sides. I always say that when all sides are angry with me, then I know that I've done a really good job, because inevitably in an armed conflict, in communal violence, there are almost always sort of both sides who commit some sorts of abuses. So we work in probably about 20 countries in Africa. I am in charge of our West Africa work, and we cover Sierra Leone, Liberia, Nigeria, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, and now Mali. And we've done a little bit of work in Niger as well. And we base our work on the legal framework, and we document, like I said, do in-depth investigation, document human rights abuses, civil and political rights violations, torture, international humanitarian law violations, violations emerging from traditional harmful practices. We also cover labor practice, so just a little bit of everything in Africa, and certainly there are very profound problems, so we're kept very busy in all of these countries. We don't work in every country, and partnerships are incredibly important for us. So I'm going to end this talk by talking about how I think an organization like mine and an organization like Binta's, as well as local organizations on the ground, can work together to raise the alarm, to flag human rights problems, and then to put forward some ideas for how those problems can be addressed. Because often human rights groups will say to me that, it's you people, the international human rights people, who should address our problems. And in a way, we come in, we do in-depth research on a topic, but it is the local groups, A, that often flag the issue for us, and B, that we need to carry on that work so as to ensure that work has life.